Right, morning. This is the end. So goodbye. Sorry, no, not the end. Yeah, I think it's the beginning, but we're talking about the end. So the topic, Lee, I think you've got a little confused. You know, when Trevor talks about starting with the end in mind, I'm not sure that he had quite this kind of topic in mind when he was referring to starting with the end in mind. Well, I suppose the real question, is it the end, or is it just a part of the process? You know, it depends on what outcome you expect. But we had that discussion yesterday, I think. So, yeah, Lee, you better tell us where we're going with this one, and hopefully it's not just 6 feet under.
Yeah, so I love Laura yesterday saying the D word. You know, it's like we can't say, well, and I'm not saying anything about Laura, but death. And you just say, and we don't even like saying so-and-so died. You know, they transitioned or they passed on, or and I understand the pain of grief, and I don't want to belittle that in any way, but I do want to to acknowledge that life does have its limits. And what does that do to our mindset? What does that do to how we view life? So it's not about death, and it's not about dwelling on that, but it's about acknowledging, as you say, Ivan, the end in mind, and living a life that is not afraid of the end, because the life that we live is so full, so abundant, so wonderful that we can say whatever, when and however the end happens, that it's been a well-lived life, and I'm pleased with the time that I had, and I used it wisely, and I gave what I could, and I gained everything that is possible to gain just from living and breathing and being and learning and growing and doing and all those wonderful things. And one of the things that made me very aware of this is in the days when I was traveling, you know, those far distant, you know, years ago, when we actually got in our car to go to somewhere, except Edward. But I did do a lot of driving to a place where I had a client about I still do, but now I do virtually 4 hours away. And in those trips, I would listen to a lot of podcasts. And one of the podcasts that I listened to was about the Coffin Club. So this was a group of women who started with a lady in New Zealand. And what they do is they decorate their own coffins. So they buy like whatever they want, whatever kind of coffin they want, and then they put their story into their coffin, or they put things into their coffin that are memorable and meaningful to them. And they don't have to be, that means some of them are 50, some of them are 70, sometimes they're 85. So they don't have to be on death's doorstep. But they are, it's not a celebration of death, it's a celebration of life. And it's them acknowledging what has been meaningful to them in their lives. So I have committed to myself and to my friends, I've announced it to all of them, that I will be starting a coffin club sometime in the next 10 years or so. And we're going to have our, you know, the one lady has her coffin propped up in her lounge. You know, to be aware that life is short. Make the most of it. Store up those precious things. So yeah, that's my introduction to the subject of death.
Okay, I think somebody's been reading too many Buffy the Vampire books or something. Yeah, still, Lee? I don't think I could. I don't think I could live with my coffin in my lounge, to be perfectly honest. Oh dear. Jesper, where do you keep yours?
Yeah, morning. I certainly agree with you, Ivan. I'm not afraid of death, and I agree that a burial is almost then a celebration of that person's life. But yeah, since we don't know when that's going to happen, I think it's to live moment by moment, full out, and you know, don't waste a moment for me. So, but in terms of this whole cycle of life, so I think the inevitability is the cycle of life, and maybe I want to start there. And when I started to discover the various books on positive thinking and all these things, I'm trying to think who was the guy, but he was one of these motivational speakers, but he was nearing the end of his life, and people started to ask him, what does he think death is about, or what death is, and is he afraid of it? I think it was Norman Vincent Peale or something, one of these people. And he said, no, he's certainly not afraid of death, but it's one of these inevitable cycles of life. And he said it's very difficult to have an appreciation of, because we only know this part of the cycle of life. The next one is only revealed to us when we get there. And then he used the analogy of a baby in its mother's womb. So when that baby is conceived, its place of safety is that womb, where it has all the nutrients, a steady temperature, the fluids, and it has his mother's constant body as its companion. And he starts, as he grows and he develops his little senses, he picks up sound and he picks up movement and he picks up all of that. But it's a safe space for him, and he's quite content in that mother's womb. But then as he grows and he gets nearer to birth, towards the end of the night, the space becomes constricted. So its ability to move around is not as free as it was like in the middle of its growth period. And then comes that final moment of birth. But for him, on that side of the experience, it may not be a pleasant experience. It may not be something that he knows what's happening now, because now he's moving out of the womb where he had freedom of movement and safety. And now he's going headfirst into this very constricted birth channel. And for, I don't know how long that process lasts, but in some cases it might be quite an ordeal to be in that extremely constricted space, but then to emerge on the other side of that constricted space, and there mother and father is waiting for him, bright lights, new noises that he's never heard before, new faces that he's never seen of the doctors and the nurses and all of that. And I quite like that analogy of now we arrive here on earth, and then that baby is developing its senses, and it has the protective environment of its parents and its household, and then slowly growing to the point where he's now experiencing life and feel comfortable in this new dimension and exploring things and sport and music and opportunities and becoming a youth and then becoming an adult. And then we are facing our next birth channel. And I think for me, death is that birth channel. And let's say we live another 90 years. But then there's a birth channel where we get the final birth. And then the word tells us it's an eternal life. So what will it look like after that? So, you know, those people who have had near-death experiences and come back, talks about the most beautiful colors and music and light, and I don't know. All I'm just saying, I think the fact is it's inevitable. It waits for each and every one of us. But while we're here, make the most of the moment. And yes, it's certainly because we are constricted to this physical body, and it has a limited, call it duration. But your soul and your spirit lives on. And I think that which you then have created, if I think of people who made music, I'm amazed, and now with modern technology, how, call it an Elvis Presley song, can be sung by Elvis, and another person sings the second voice with Elvis as if it's an Elvis duet with this new person. And so it's all sorts of things. And I mean, us, the authors of books, we were not original thinkers. We use the input of people. So I think the impact and influence lives on, but your personal ability to grow further and get new input in your life, that's over on this side of the earth. Yeah, so I think let's leave it there. Let's look forward to our new birth.
Great, thanks, Jasper. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Norman Vincent Peale. I always remember one of the statements he made in one of his books. He said, the most popular place in town, it's the cemetery. People are just dying to get there. So yeah, Edward, your thoughts on this one? I see Laura's rising from the dead, but yeah, I'm not too sure.
The zombie apocalypse is just about to happen. I haven't given any thought to this subject because I'm very well aware of what the management gurus say, that you get what you think about. So I wasn't going to think about it. So these remarks are pretty much off the cuff. And I think it's interesting. I think life and death are perhaps different sides of the same coin. Although, of course, you can avoid death. You can avoid life by dying, but you can't afford dying by living. So at some point in time, you're going to end. I had to face the spectre of death one Sunday, actually. Well, death for me, because I thought I might have to give up running. What happened was, if you don't feel like going out for a run one day, if you take your pulse, if your pulse is the same as normal, it means you're being lazy and get your fat ass out of the door. If your pulse is elevated, it means you may be coming down with an illness, so don't go running. So I was taking my pulse and it went 1, 2, 3, well, it was going 1, 2, 3, 4. And I thought, what? So I took it, I took it again and it went like 31, 32, 33, 34. What? And I was panicking. I didn't feel ill. And I thought, well, I can't dial 999. Anyhow, I arranged to go and see my GP the following day. And of course, in that time, I'm thinking maybe I've got a heart condition. I'll have to give up running. And to me, that is the end of life. And a bit like Lee said, I looked back on my running life and I realized I would be quite happy not to run, because I've had such a rich and wonderful running life. I've lived my running life to the full. I've got all those wonderful memories. And I think it's very often you find that when two people that really love each other, when one of them dies, they find it quite easy to carry on. Whereas if you've got not too good a marriage, it becomes more difficult, because there's always, oh, I should have done that, I should have done this, I should have done the other. So I think, if you had a good life, death does not cause too much of a problem. And then the other thing I thought about was, death exposes us, or some people, as self-centered, because especially if you're religious, when the person dies, they're going to go to heaven, a better place. And yet we're sad when they die. So someone we love going to a better place makes us sad. Kind of weird, that, isn't it? You'd have thought you'd be happy for them. So that kind of made me think a bit funny. And then quite by total coincidence, I got a phone call yesterday evening from a guy I've not spoken to for maybe about 18 months. We occasionally go on running trips together, and he came with me one time to run a comrade's down run. And no, up run. He did an up run. And then a couple of years later, we went over to the Netherlands for a 100K race. And he won his age group in the World 100K Championships, which was amazing because he only does one long run every couple of years. He normally takes part in cross country for his club. And he was hoping to do comrades in 2020, and of course he couldn't. And he's hoping to do comrades in 2021, and he can't because it's been cancelled because he wants to do the other direction. And John was talking to me on the phone, and we were having a chat about it. And he was asking me what I thought was happening in South Africa. And he said, yeah, because at my age, he says, I haven't got a lot of time left. And John's 78. And I suppose he's right, isn't he? He's got to think, well, I might not die until I'm 80, 90, 100. And John's in very good health and he's a very good runner. But at some point in time, he's not going to make the comrades cut off. Even though he can still run, he's not going to make the time limit, or he's not going to make the qualifying time. So I think as you get older, you start to think more about when that final curtain comes down. And you start to think, oh, perhaps I need to do this, perhaps I need to do that. And also you think, I can't do that, I can't do this, because there are limitations on what you can achieve. You know, might be a bit difficult now for me to win a 24-hour race, or actually, you know, finish a 100-miler in the time limit, or whatever it is. So I think, yeah, as you get closer to that final curtain, you start thinking about life a bit more and thinking what I should have done. Thinking about what you're going to leave behind as well. Because I've started thinking, well, when I go, I don't want my daughters having to mess around trying to find stuff. So I'm now starting to think, well, perhaps I should, you know, leave the password to my investment account somewhere and get all that sort of stuff sorted out. And yeah, Trevor's just said, try finish a 5K in the time limit. You know, when I do park run, I always volunteer as a tail walker, because then I've got an excuse to come last. Yeah, so I'm, you know, I'm starting to think, oh, I need to tidy my life up now, because it's going to end at some point in time. And thinking about Lee's coffins, a friend of mine, she makes eco coffins. And what I really want to do is for there to be two nuts in my coffin. One's me, and one's the seed of a tree. So when I die, a tree grows out of my body, and that to me would be the best way to go ever. So that's me.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, interesting that I was watching a documentary the other day about a fungus in a jungle that actually invades the bodies of ants and other insects, and regenerates itself out of them. So yeah, maybe we can put you in the jungle. Right, Laura, your cat woke you up. I thought it wanted to have a comment, but I see it's moved off again now. So are you with us?
Yes, I am. I am not out there if my cat got in the way. Yeah, so at every time I look at a redwood, I'll know it's you having a piece of wood out of your arse. So I'll think of you whenever I see that piece of wood. So yeah, you know, there's so many things. It's just thinking about the cake. Do you have cake or death? Do you have a flag? Where do we go with this? I think about the whole process of death. I want people to have a party. That if you ever seen the movie Phenomenon with John Travolta, and spoiler alert, he's got something in he's got like a tumor in his brain, and it's inevitable. You know what's going to happen. It's just the process of how he chooses how it's going to unfold, and the ultimate's going to happen. I mean, for all of us, it's going to happen. It's just the way in which he's empowered to have it manifest on his own terms. And then a year later, they're having a party in his honor because of the difference that he made in the world. And I think that's lovely. That I don't want people to wallow. I mean, grief for. I was watching a Trezad Tremaine. He's a coach that I follow in his positive intelligence certification program right now, and I was watching a video of his on grief and loss, and it's grief for what it's grief for the fact that not that the person's gone, and they're not really gone. It depends on how you look at it, if it's esoteric or whatnot. Grief for the fact that the world isn't blessed by it, if you choose to use that word, by the presence and the legacy that the person's left behind. That it's that the person is a physical. I mean, we're human beings. Some people say we're human beings having we're spiritual beings having a human experience. This is just a vessel. So fill my own cup first and nourish others from the overflow. Just having so much, I'm so full of myself. So flippin' full of myself that I can't just help but to nourish others from what's coming over. And if that's the legacy that I leave on the world, then have at it.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, you know. I mean, some of these so-called motivational speakers and positive thinkers say you must write the eulogy you would like to have given at your funeral, or the words you want on your tombstone. And whenever I came to those sections in those books, I just drew a complete blank. Now, maybe that's a reflection on my life, I don't know, but it certainly doesn't motivate me to do anything, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, you can put blank on my headstone. I don't mind. In fact, I don't even want a headstone. So I'm surprised you want a coffin. I think you know, just chuck me in the furnace and scatter me in the four winds, and I'm quite happy. So that's you know, these ideas of coffins and you know, putting things in coffins doesn't sound very eco-friendly to me at all. So yeah, let's get rid of them completely. No point. I certainly don't want one in my lounge with all my memories in it. So you know, that just I mean, my lounge is like that anyway, but without the coffin. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, you know, and people say it's one of the biggest fears, but you know, interesting enough, not one of the six of us have actually said anything about that. So maybe it's not. So you know, who makes up these myths? I certainly think it is just simply part of the process. Is it the outcome, or was it just another step in the process? Well, that depends on what you believe in and where you go from there. So, Trevor, I think I've had my rattle. I don't know if it was my last death rattle, but anyway, it was your turn now.
So speak for yourself when you talk of fear. So you talked of what outcome and process. Yesterday, I talked of journey and destination. This topic gave me an absolutely restful night. I didn't think about it at all. And I'm just going to comment on a couple of things. Lee, you said at some point, I think it was at the point of death, you look back and ask, how's your life been? You said something like that. You assess what's your life been like. And it struck me, do you do this 1 second before you die or 1 second after you die? And if it's 1 second after, what's the point sort of scenario? So you better be doing things now. And then what did Jasper have to say? Well, I've already forgotten. So another death of a neuron just calculated in the mind. But I tell you what did strike me is I had an epiphany many years ago when I was asking myself the question, what will happen on the day that I die? It was just part of the natural consequence of why am I here? What's my purpose? What's all this thing? Trying to work this out. No one actually taught me any of these things. I had to start asking all these questions and trying to find out the answers. And I came across reading the Bible just as an exercise, certainly not as a religious endeavor.
And somewhere in the Bible, it turned around and said, man, if you try and get to these answers, it's like trying to take a camel through the eye of a needle. I still never understood what size that needle was and what needle they were talking about. But Lee will educate us on the arches that they were talking about there. But it struck me at that particular time that I've always been an optimist, that I've always gone down the route of everything about my life and things around me. I've always looked from a glass half full perspective rather than a glass half empty. And it struck me that, hey, on the day that I die, does everything just end? And isn't that just the most pessimistic outlook you can possibly have? Because if this life is just about coming to a point of and it's all over, well, what the hell is, what's the good of living from day to day? And that sort of took me down a route of, well, can I intellectually, logically, and I know Ed's going to fall off his chair. This was something of an intellectual exercise to try and work out on the day that I die, do I want to have an optimistic outlook or a pessimistic outlook? So I chose an optimistic outlook, that surely there must be something more. And then to start researching, well, potentially what could be there that is something more. And that took me into delving into all the various religions. Where do we go and what do we have to do? So without pointing people in various directions, I just ask, on the day that you die, a couple of seconds before that, will you be an optimist or will you be a pessimist? And how have you lived through your life? And maybe that will give you some sort of guideline as to where to go and look for answers as to what will happen on the day that you die. Have I got all the answers? Yeah, I have, but Ed keeps pushing my buttons and I have to question them all the time. So I'm still optimistic on what would happen on the day that I die. But I'm certainly make certain that every day is a journey, and we've got to enjoy every second of every day as best as we can, and just try and be happy, glass half full.
Yes, Ed.
I've never understood that glass half full or glass half empty thing, because I think people say optimists see the glass as half full, but to me, the glass being half empty is the better option, because it means you've drunk half of it and you've still got half left. So you're in a better position. So I always struggle with that whatever it is, metaphor, analogy, or whatever, because which is which? Is it better to have the glass half full, or is it better to have the glass half empty? And what's the difference?
So if I can respond to Ed, if ever I fall into the trap of wanting you in a double canoe, just remind me not to actually send you the invite. I'll rather paddle a single canoe, Ed, because our canoe is going to go in two different directions, man.
Yes, Jasper.
Just as an interesting point, I also had that question of for the camel to go through the eye of the needle, and it goes back to the language of the time. And in Jerusalem, there was one narrow gate, and for security reasons, when the camels came heavily loaded with their wares to be sold in the marketplace, before they could enter the city gates, there was a narrow gate or a small gate where you had to first offload the camel so that the camel without its luggage, and then they squeezed the camel through the gate, but he could not have gone through if it wasn't if he didn't offload the baggage. And I think it's also a good analogy for us in life, that we're taking no baggage with, we're taking nothing with. As we come into this world is the way we live.
Thanks, Jasper. And you just left with a hump on your back. So yeah, I'm not too sure how you get rid of that part. But yeah, the last straw breaks the camel's back. So yeah, got to get rid of that one as well. Okay, so after all of that convoluted discussion around a very simple termination, Lee, where do we go from here?
actually brought it to an end. So I'm suggesting we open it to the floor and ask if there's anything that is bubbling for anybody in terms of a topic, an idea, a story. What's top of mind for you at the moment?
That's the death of the conversation. Yeah, okay, it came alive. Yeah.
Lee triggered it off by her thing about the glass not being empty, it's being full of liquid and full of air. And I wondered whether we could do anything around that thing where the guy does a lecture, he's got a glass, he puts loads of stones in it, asks if the glass is full, then he puts some sand in it and asks if the glass is full, and then he puts some water in it. You know, and is there anything around that? And I think Laura's got something that she wants to add to that.
Well, we talk about glass half full, glass half empty. I can actually, it depends on how do you balance it. Literally, there's a video, if you take a dime and you can balance the glass of water on its edge and let it sit there, it's a balance. I can prove it to you. That's another time. So, I mean,
Well, let's talk.
how do we balance? Maybe a topic, how do we balance our lives? What's meaningful?
Yeah, well, that fits in with Ed's rocks and stones and sand in the glass. And Ed, I'm afraid, and I'm really surprised that you got the last part completely wrong, because you don't put water in, you put a beer in. Because even after you've done all these tasks, it's always time to have a beer with friends. So.
That's a total waste of beer, putting it in sand. You put it down your throat.
Especially after an ultra marathon. All right, folks, go and run an ultra marathon this weekend and come back with your glass full of all sorts of interesting things for Monday morning's discussion, and we'll take it from there. But have a great weekend. Cheers, man.
Bye, everyone.